The airport terminal was a whirl of noise, footsteps tapping against polished floors, the constant murmur of announcements, and the hurried chatter of travelers rushing to their gates. Amid the crowd, a woman stood out, not because of her clothing or luggage, but because of the gentle curve of her belly beneath a loose sweater. Amelia moved cautiously, each step measured, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. Her face carried the calm of someone used to holding herself together through storms. Then came a sudden, sharp sound that cut through the ambient noise. A dog barking, but not a casual bark. It was urgent, desperate. Max, a tall, lean German shepherd, barked with fierce determination. His eyes were locked on Amelia, then darting toward the people ahead as if trying to warn them. The passengers nearby turned their heads, confused and uneasy. Some frowned, others shifted away, uncomfortable with the dog's intensity. Before long, airline police officers noticed. Their expressions were a mix of suspicion and annoyance. One officer approached, his voice cold and sharp. "Ma'am, control your dog. This is a public place." Amelia's voice trembled as she replied, "He is warning us. Please, listen." But the officers were unmoved. They did not see the urgency in Max's eyes, only the disruption he caused. Amelia's heart pounded as Max's barks grew louder, more desperate, a protective force standing between danger and the unsuspecting crowd. The tension built like a storm about to break. No one was ready for what would come next. No one could stop what was already unfolding. And by the time the truth revealed itself, it was too late. Amelia's life was shaped by shadows she never wished to revisit. As a child, she moved from one foster home to another, never staying long enough to build trust. Her father's absence was a wound that never fully healed, and her mother's struggles with illness left Amelia to face the world too soon. She learned to carry her burden silently, hiding pain beneath a calm, gentle smile. People often mistook her quiet nature for weakness, but inside she carried a fierce determination to protect what mattered most. Max was more than just a dog to Amelia. He was her constant companion, trained to sense what others could not. Years ago, during a difficult period of her life, she had met a retired military trainer who saw her potential and offered Max, a German shepherd trained to detect danger, to serve as a guardian. Max's deep amber eyes held intelligence and loyalty beyond words. Together they formed an unbreakable bond, one built on trust and understanding. When Amelia felt vulnerable, Max was her strength. When she needed courage, Max gave it to her. Despite the invisible hardships, Amelia was not someone to back down. She had grown into a woman who quietly faced challenges others ignored. Yet the world often judged her harshly. At the airport, beneath the bustling crowds and bright lights, she was just another traveler, a pregnant woman with a dog that barked too much. The airline officers saw her with suspicion, dismissing her as anxious or troublesome. But Amelia and Max carried secrets and strength hidden beneath their quiet exterior, strength that no one was ready to recognize. As she moved forward, clutching her belly, Max stayed alert, sensing a threat that no one else could see. The moment was fragile, but it was only the beginning. The airport was a maze of polished floors, glass walls, and endless corridors filled with strangers. It was a place where people hurried past one another, some eager, some exhausted, and some burdened by unseen struggles. Amelia had traveled through this terminal before, but today felt different. The bright fluorescent lights cast sharp shadows, and the steady hum of announcements barely masked the undercurrent of tension in the air. Security checkpoints were a fortress of rules and suspicion. The lines stretched long, filled with travelers, stripped of their comforts and privacy in the name of safety. Officers in uniform moved with a practiced sternness, their eyes scanning for anything that did not fit the expected pattern. It was a world where patience thinned quickly, and judgment came fast and hard. Amelia noticed the wary glances thrown her way, whispers carried by the air, unspoken doubts about a pregnant woman with a dog. The dog Max walked closely beside her, ears pricked, sensing the tension around them. It was a subtle kind of hostility, not openly cruel, but heavy with exclusion. The system felt designed to push her and Max to the edges, a reminder that they were different, perhaps out of place. Nearby, passengers checked their watches or tapped impatiently on their phones. The hum of the crowd was a mix of anticipation and weariness. For Amelia, this was not just about catching a flight. It was about surviving an environment that often overlooked those who did not fit the mold. She felt the weight of every eye, the silent judgment that made her grip Max's leash tighter. In this controlled chaos, trust was scarce, and danger could be hidden anywhere. Max's quiet growl was a soft echo against the backdrop of the airport, a warning no one was ready to heed. The waiting area near Gate 23 was crowded, voices mixing with the intermittent calls for boarding. Amelia sat quietly, her hand resting on her belly, while Max remained close by her side. But the calm was fragile. Max's sharp bark suddenly shattered the air. Loud, urgent, impossible to ignore. Heads turned. Passengers frowned, some annoyed. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd like an unseen current. An airline officer, stern-faced and impatient, strode over. "Sir," he said to Max, voice clipped, "control your dog. This is a public space." The man's eyes flicked to Amelia. "Ma'am, your dog is disturbing other passengers. You need to calm him." Amelia's voice was soft but firm. "He's trying to warn us. Please, listen." The officer shook his head, a dismissive smile crossing his lips. "It is just a dog, nothing more." Passengers nearby began to murmur, some clearly siding with the officer. "She's overreacting." "It's just a nervous dog," Max growled low, his gaze fixed on a woman across the room, her face pale and tense. One passenger, a man in a business suit, scoffed loudly. "What's the deal? Some crazy woman with a barking mutt." His words stung, slicing through the air. Amelia's cheeks flushed, but she held back tears. Max was pulled away roughly, yelping softly. The dog's eyes pleaded, trying to communicate what words could not. Amelia's voice cracked as she whispered, "Max, please be strong." Around them, a sense of injustice grew heavy, a silent anger that simmered beneath polite smiles and forced calm. No one could yet see the truth behind the barking. The warning went unheeded, and danger edged closer with every passing second. The crowded noise of the terminal faded into a dull roar as Amelia found a quiet corner away from prying eyes and judgmental stares. Her heart still hammered with a mix of frustration and fear. The echoes of the man's harsh words haunted her. Crazy woman with a barking mutt. The insult wasn't just about her dog. It was about her, her condition, and everything she fought to hide. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the life growing inside her was fragile and vulnerable. The protective instinct surged, clashing with the helplessness she felt. Memories crept in, lonely nights, whispered doubts, the endless struggle to prove herself worthy. She remembered the nights when she had no one but Max, the only soul who never judged or turned away. Max sat beside her, calm now but alert, sensing her pain. She reached out and ran her fingers gently through his fur, finding solace in his warmth. His eyes met hers, reflecting a silent understanding, a bond that needed no words. "You are not alone," she whispered. "We will face this together." In the quiet, her mind wandered to the early days of training. Max was more than a pet. He was a protector trained to sense danger, to respond with precision. Amelia herself had learned to read his signals, the flick of an ear, a subtle shift in posture, the quiet tension before a bark. Their connection was a language of its own, built from countless hours of trust and patience. Beneath her quiet exterior, Amelia held skills others did not expect. She was sharp, resourceful, and patient. She had taught Max to detect threats, chemical sense, hidden objects, even shifts in human behavior. It was a secret strength she rarely showed. Now sitting in the corner, she felt the weight of it pressing on her. Max's barks were not just noise. They were warnings from a trained mind and body. A flicker of resolve sparked within her. She would not let doubt or mockery silence them. The truth was there, waiting to be uncovered. But the question lingered. Would anyone be willing to listen before it was too late? Max's instincts refused to quiet. As Amelia made her way toward the gate once more, the German shepherd's posture shifted from tense to purposeful. His nose twitched, nostrils flaring as he locked onto a nearby object, a small, unattended bag resting against a bench. Max tugged gently at Amelia's sleeve, his eyes intense, as if urging her to investigate. Amelia hesitated, glancing around nervously before moving toward the bag. The crowd buzzed with impatience, but Max's focus was unwavering. Amelia's voice was calm yet firm when she spoke to a nearby airline staff member. "That bag has been here too long. It needs to be checked." The staff member's eyes narrowed, reluctant. "Ma'am, you're not safe. Please step aside." Just then, a janitor who had been sweeping nearby paused, watching closely. His face held a quiet knowing, the kind that comes from years of unnoticed observation. "That bag's been there for hours," he whispered, glancing toward a security monitor. His tone was low but urgent, drawing a few curious glances. Max's low growl deepened. Amelia's heart quickened. The atmosphere thickened with unease. A young security officer, new and more open-minded than others, stepped forward. "Let's take a look," he said quietly. His eyes flicked to Amelia, a hint of respect breaking through his skepticism. The bag was carefully inspected, revealing no immediate danger, but the tension lingered. Max's behavior hinted at something unseen, a hidden threat beneath the surface. Amelia's quiet confidence grew. This was no ordinary dog's anxiety. Behind her calm exterior, Amelia held more than hope. She had connections, contacts from her past life, resources that others could only guess at. Max was not just trained for simple detection. He had skills refined by military trainers, a partner shaped by a woman with a sharp mind and unyielding courage. For the first time, small cracks appeared in the wall of doubt surrounding Amelia. Whispers spread among passengers and staff alike. Some began to wonder if there was more to this pregnant woman and her dog than met the eye. The quiet power between them hinted at a story that was just beginning to unfold. The lead officer's eyes darkened as Amelia's calm insistence unsettled the crowd. He stepped forward, voice firm and dismissive. "Enough," he said sharply. "We follow protocol. No threat was found. You are causing unnecessary alarm." His gaze locked on Amelia with quiet challenge. Max's hackles rose. His bark returned, low, fierce, filled with warning. The dog was no longer just alert. He was protective, almost pleading. Amelia took a steadying breath, refusing to back down. "You are missing something," she said softly, but with iron beneath the words. Max is trained. He knows danger when he senses it. Around them, passengers shifted uneasily. A mother held her child closer. A businessman's smirk faded into a worried frown. The officer's stubbornness clashed with the growing tension in the room. A young airline employee approached, her voice hesitant but sincere. "Sir, maybe we should take another look? The dog's behavior is unusual." The lead officer ignored her, arms crossed. "She is just trying to provoke a reaction." Suddenly, Max lunged forward, narrowly restrained by Amelia's firm grip. His eyes locked on a man seated near the bag, a nervous figure constantly glancing over his shoulder. Max growled deeper, a low rumble that filled the air. Amelia's heart pounded. She looked at the man, then back to the officers. "That man," she whispered, "he's hiding something." The crowd's whispers grew louder. Suspicion was shifting. The lead officer's jaw tightened, a flicker of unease crossing his face. He gestured for backup but hesitated. The dog's reaction was powerful and precise, not random noise. For the first time, Amelia saw a crack in the officer's confidence. The confrontation was no longer just about rules or protocol. It was about listening to a warning before it was too late. Max's growl deepened, and the room held its breath. The invisible line between safety and disaster thinned. Something was coming, something they could no longer ignore. The tension in the terminal reached a breaking point just as the bag's contents were suddenly revealed. Not explosives, but a cleverly disguised package filled with illicit materials, enough to cause harm in a crowded space. The airport erupted into chaos. Officers scrambled to secure the area, but the damage was done. Panic rippled through the crowd like wildfire, and Amelia's eyes filled with tears, not just from relief, but from the bitter truth that had been ignored for too long. Amelia's voice trembled, but it carried strength. "Max was trained by a military rescue team. He is more than just a dog. We've been warning you." The officers who had doubted her glanced away, faces pale with regret. This was no ordinary traveler and no ordinary pet. Amelia's quiet demeanor masked years of hard-earned resilience and a powerful partnership built on trust and training. The truth spilled out, stunning the crowd. Amelia was not just a pregnant woman, she was a survivor with a past few knew. Max had been her protector in darker days, trained in detecting threats others missed. Her calm presence hid a fierce spirit, one that refused to be silenced by ignorance or doubt. The man near the bag, now handcuffed and escorted by police, glared with defeated anger. His plans were foiled by the vigilance of a woman and her dog. The officers, once dismissive, were forced to acknowledge their mistake. A senior agent stepped forward, offering Amelia a nod of respect. Max stood proudly, no longer the desperate barker, but a hero. The crowd's whispers turned to admiration. Amelia's quiet strength reshaped the story, one of resilience, warning, and truth. The airport, once a place of suspicion and silence, was now a stage for justice. At that moment, the power shifted. Amelia and Max were no longer outsiders. They were protectors, guardians who proved that sometimes the greatest strength lies in listening before it is too late. The airport terminal was thick with disbelief. Passengers who had earlier scoffed at Amelia and Max now stood in stunned silence. The scene had shifted from annoyance to alarm in an instant. The man who had planted the dangerous package was being led away in handcuffs, his expression hard and defeated. Officers moved swiftly to clear the area, their faces a mix of urgency and regret. Whispers spread like wildfire. "How did we miss this?" a woman murmured. "We should have listened." The lead officer, who had earlier dismissed Amelia's warnings, stood quietly, his usual confidence replaced by an uneasy silence. The weight of his mistake was palpable. Around him, colleagues exchanged glances that spoke of unspoken blame. Max, now calm but alert, was at Amelia's side. The crowd's eyes softened as they looked upon the dog, not as a nuisance, but as a guardian who had seen danger before any human could. Children nearby reached out to gently stroke Max's head, sensing his gentle spirit beneath the powerful stance. Amelia, her breath steadying, glanced at Max with quiet gratitude. A janitor, who had observed the events unfold from the shadows, nodded quietly. He was often overlooked, but today his awareness has been invaluable. "Sometimes," he said softly to a nearby officer, "it's the quiet ones who see the most." The officer looked at him, understanding the deeper truth behind the words. The community around the terminal began to rally behind Amelia. Conversations shifted from criticism to support. Social media buzzed with praise for the woman and her dog who had prevented disaster. The incident was a reminder of how easily judgment can blind people to truth. Amelia's voice was calm but clear when she addressed the crowd. "We must learn to listen, to trust instincts and not dismiss warnings based on appearances." Her words resonated deeply, a call for awareness and change. The airport, once a place of rigid rules and cold suspicion, had been transformed by the courage of one woman and her loyal companion. Justice was no longer just a word, it was a promise born from courage and truth. The lead airline officer who had dismissed Amelia's warnings faced the consequences swiftly. News of his negligence spread throughout the airport authority, and within days he was removed from his position. The investigation revealed that his stubborn refusal to listen had nearly allowed tragedy to strike. His colleagues, once silent, now spoke openly about the importance of trust and vigilance. Amelia stood before a gathering of airport staff, law enforcement, and passengers, her voice steady, carrying the weight of the ordeal. "Trust is not something to be given lightly," she said, eyes shining with quiet fire. "But when someone or something raises a warning, it deserves attention. Today, that warning saved lives." Around her, Max sat proudly, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded. A security supervisor stepped forward and placed a medal on Max's collar, a symbol of honor and recognition for his role. Applause rippled through the room. For once, the dog who had been scorned was celebrated as a hero. The janitor who had witnessed much of the event was called to speak. His words were simple but profound. "Sometimes the ones we ignore see the most. Courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's quiet and steady." His statement drew nods and murmurs of agreement. Amelia's journey had been one of quiet strength, facing skepticism and scorn with patience and resilience. Today, that strength was vindicated. The airline instituted new training for staff, emphasizing respect for service animals and the instincts of those who rely on them. The culture of dismissal began to shift toward understanding and care. As Amelia looked down at Max, she whispered, "We did it, boy." We showed them the truth. Max wagged his tail gently, a silent promise of loyalty and protection for whatever lay ahead. Justice had been served, not through anger, but through courage and truth. In the end, their story was a reminder that standing firm in the face of doubt can change the course of many lives. It was a victory not just for Amelia and Max, but for every voice that had ever been ignored. Months passed, and the atmosphere at the airport shifted in ways no one could have predicted. The memory of the incident with Amelia and Max became a turning point, a reminder that vigilance and respect could save lives. New policies were introduced, training sessions held, and a renewed focus on compassion and understanding began to permeate the halls of the terminal. Amelia returned several times, not just as a traveler, but as an advocate. She worked closely with airport staff and local organizations to educate people about the importance of service animals like Max. What had once been a place of tension and silent judgment now welcomed her with warmth and respect. Max, once a desperate barker, was now a calm figure of reassurance, admired by children and adults alike. Passengers stopped to greet Amelia, many sharing stories of their own struggles and triumphs. The atmosphere was lighter, more human. The once rigid rules softened, allowing space for kindness and understanding. Amelia's presence brought a sense of healing, not just for herself, but for the community she had touched. Max became a symbol of protection and trust. His calm demeanor and watchful eyes offered comfort to nervous travelers and reassurance to airport staff. He was honored as more than a working dog. He was a guardian whose instincts and loyalty had changed the system. Amelia's quiet strength and Max's unwavering loyalty reshaped not only the terminal, but the hearts of those who passed through it. Together, they showed that courage often comes from the most unexpected places, and that change begins with a single voice willing to speak up. As Amelia looked around the busy terminal, she felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long and difficult, but the transformation was real. In this place, once defined by suspicion, a new chapter had begun, one marked by respect, understanding, and hope. Max nudged her hand gently, a reminder that they were never alone. Their story was no longer about fear or doubt. It was about the power of connection and the promise of a better tomorrow. 1 year had passed since the tense day at the airport when Max's desperate barks warned of danger no one else could see. Amelia stood in a sunlit park, the gentle breeze playing with her hair. Her hand rested lightly on her belly, now round with new life, a quiet symbol of hope and renewal. Max lay calmly beside her, his deep amber eyes watching the world with quiet wisdom. The journey since that day had changed them both. Amelia had founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting working dogs and their handlers, a place where courage and loyalty were celebrated. The foundation offered training programs, support networks, and advocacy, helping others like her find strength and purpose. It was a dream born from struggle, shaped by resilience. Children gathered around Max, fascinated by the dog who had become a local hero. Amelia watched with a soft smile as one little girl reached out to touch Max's head, her eyes wide with wonder. "He's so brave," the girl whispered. Max responded with a gentle wave of his tail, as if understanding every word. Amelia's thoughts drifted to the past, years of doubt, the sting of judgment, and the weight of silent battles. Yet here she was, surrounded by life and light, proof that courage could rise from even the darkest places. Max nudged her hand, breaking her reverie. She leaned down and whispered, "Thank you, my friend. We saved more than a moment that day." As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the park, Amelia felt a calm settle over her, a sense of peace earned through perseverance. The world was not perfect, but they had carved a space where trust and protection could flourish. Their story was no longer just about warning signs or narrow escapes. It was a story of transformation, of listening deeply, and of the quiet power found in the bond between a woman and her dog. And as Max rested his head on her knee, Amelia whispered a promise. "Together we will keep watching. Together we will keep protecting. For the future, for those who cannot speak, and for all the moments still to come. In that shared silence, their journey continued, unbroken, unyielding, and full of hope. If this story moved you, take a moment to appreciate the silent heroes like Max, the dogs who protect us even when no one else listens. Support organizations that train and care for working dogs by checking the links below. Have you ever experienced a moment when trusting your instincts made all the difference? Share your story in the comments. We would love to hear from you. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in the power of courage and loyalty. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that inspires change and justice. Together we can learn to listen before it is too late.